all make mistakes. Growing up in the States, you hear stories about bad decisions, but you never really think your bad decision could lead to a years-long nightmare. We like to think we're safe in our own homes, right? But what if you accidentally invited a predator into your life because of one stupid, impulsive moment? Today, I'm sharing a story I've never told anyone outside of my inner circle. This isn't just about a weekend in county jail. It's about what happens when a monster realizes you're the perfect target. I was 18. It was a Friday night, and honestly, I was just a dumb kid trying to look cool. A few friends and I decided we were going to walk out of a local Walmart with a new phone. I know it sounds cliché, but the arrogance of being 18 is real. I thought I was untouchable. I got the packaging open, shoved the phone into my hoodie pocket, and started walking toward the sliding doors. But I didn't make it. Loss prevention had been watching the cameras the whole time. Within an hour, I was sitting in the back of a squad car, staring at the same parking lot I'd pulled into an hour earlier. My parents were going to be furious, but I figured I'd just get a ticket and be home by Saturday morning. I was wrong. The courts were closed until Monday. I was being booked into county jail. The booking process is dehumanizing. You lose your name, your clothes, your phone. You're just a number. When I finally walked into that holding area, I felt like I was in a movie, but the fear was visceral. I was the youngest person there by a long shot. I stood out. That's when I met Bob. He was in his late 40s, calm, almost fatherly. He didn't scream or act aggressive like the guys in the corner. He started a conversation, asking what I was in for. When I told him, he just laughed it off and said, "Kid, you'll be fine." For the first few hours, I was actually relieved. I thought I'd found an ally in a place filled with dangerous people. He gave me the lay of the land, how to handle the guards, how to eat, how to stay out of trouble. But as the night wore on, the ally vibe disappeared. Bob started asking questions that were way too personal. Where did I live? Did I have a girlfriend? Was my house empty while I was here? At first I brushed it off as prison boredom, but then he started invading my space. He'd sit way too close on the lower bunk. He'd put a hand on my knee while he was talking. When I'd try to pull away, he'd give me this slow, knowing smile that made my skin crawl. The lights in there never truly turn off, and I spent 2 nights with my eyes barely closed, just listening to him breathe on the top bunk. Every time I looked up, he was staring down at me. It was pure psychological torture. When Monday finally came, I was released. I just wanted to forget the whole thing. I showered for an hour and crashed. But 2 days later, I got a random follow request on Instagram. No name, no posts, just a blurry photo of a dark room. I accepted it, thinking it was a random bot. Then came the DM. It was a selfie of Bob. He had the same grin, and the caption was just, "Miss you already." My blood turned to ice. He didn't just know my name. He'd used public records or jail systems to track me down. A week later, I saw a beat-up sedan parked across from my house. The guy inside didn't move for hours. Then I heard it, the front door handle wiggling, then the back door. I called 911, shaking. By the time the cops arrived, the car was gone. I eventually got a restraining order, and after a lot of back and forth, I saw him once more at a local dive bar. I walked out and never looked back. That restraining order was just a piece of paper, but it gave me enough distance to move on. People ask me, how did he find me? And that's the scariest part. In the US, your information is so much easier to find than you think. You don't realize how vulnerable you are until you're sitting in your living room wondering if the guy at your door is the guy you shared a cell with. If you take anything from this, let it be this. Be careful with your digital footprint and trust your gut. If a person feels wrong, they usually are. There's a reason people say curiosity killed the cat. We all love a good mystery, right? We see these massive abandoned buildings on the side of the road, decaying, hollowed-out monuments to a different time, and we think, I want to see what's inside. But sometimes those walls aren't just empty. Sometimes they're waiting for you. My friend Laura and I learned the hard way that there are some places in this country that aren't abandoned for the reasons you think. I lived about an hour away from the city, and my commute took me past this gargantuan, ominous structure in the middle of a field. It looked like something out of an old horror flick. Arched windows, a massive cross at the highest peak, and surrounded by nothing but overgrown grass. Locals didn't talk about it. They just avoided it. I'm not the type to take risks. I'm a rule follower. But there was something about that building that obsessed me. When I told my friend Laura, she was all for it. It's empty, she kept saying. No one's there. It's just ghosts and dust. I was on the fence, but the logic I eventually used is embarrassing looking back. If there is security, they'd be off duty by 1 a.m. We thought we were smart. We were so wrong. We pulled the car over at 1 a.m., walking the last 10 minutes in the dark to avoid drawing attention. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of mold and rot. When we finally stood at the front door, it didn't even fight us. The lock was unlatched. Inside, it was like stepping into a tomb. With our flashlights cutting through the dust, we realized what this place actually was. A decommissioned prison. Rows of iron cells, debris everywhere, the ceiling literally falling in. It was a death trap. I wanted to turn back, but Laura wanted to push deeper. That's when the silence was broken. Crash! The sound of metal hitting concrete echoed through the hall like a gunshot. We froze. And then, from the end of the cell block, a figure emerged. He didn't look like a ghost. He looked like a guy in jeans and a flannel. He stopped, held his hands up in a defensive, I don't mean any harm gesture, and said his name was Mike. He claimed to be a security guard. He spoke with this incredibly smooth, almost hypnotic tone. He told us he was paid to detain trespassers until the cops could come. Laura wasn't buying it. She started peppering him with questions, but he just laughed. He was too calm. He told us he'd escort us out the back way because the front entrance had collapsed. We were scared, we were lost, and he was the only one who knew the way out. He led us deep into the bowels of the building, into a corridor so narrow we had to walk single file. It felt like we were walking further and further away from the road. Finally, he brought us to a heavy door that led down into a pitch-black basement. "After you," he said. That was the moment. My gut, that primal human instinct, screamed at me. Why would a security guard take us deeper into the dark? When I hesitated, he grabbed my arm. That physical contact broke the spell. Laura screamed, pushed him, and we didn't look back. We didn't run. We sprinted through that labyrinth of cells, expecting to feel his hand on our backs at any second. We made it to the car, locked the doors, and didn't speak for an hour. A week later, I worked up the courage to go to the local precinct. I confessed we'd broken in, thinking I'd get a trespassing fine. The officer looked at me, dead serious, and said, "That prison has no security, no guards, no cameras, no patrols. If you saw someone there, you didn't see a guard." I still get cold shivers just thinking about it. We have no idea who that man was or what he was waiting for in that basement. I'm just grateful I'm still here to tell this story. If you're ever tempted to explore an abandoned building, don't. Some doors are meant to stay closed. You think of a prison as a place where you keep people in. You think of yourself as the one in control. But what happens when the power dynamic flips? What happens when the guy behind bars knows more about your family, your hometown, and your secrets than you do yourself? I spent years as a correctional officer thinking I knew how to handle inmates, but I was wrong. This is the story of Edgar, a man who proved that sometimes, even from behind a locked door, a predator can reach into your living room. I took a job as a CO about 1,000 miles away from my hometown. I was young, ready for a change of pace, and honestly, I liked the job. That's where I met Edgar. He was in for a parole violation, nothing violent. He was always polite, called me sir, and kept to himself. I didn't think twice about him. He was just another inmate in a massive system. That was my first mistake. I treated him like a human being, and in hindsight, I think that's exactly what he was waiting for. It started small. One morning during rounds, Edgar looked at me and asked, "How's your brother Stan doing?" I stopped dead in my tracks. My brother lives 1,000 miles away. No one at my precinct knew I even had a brother. I blew it off, thought maybe it was a coincidence, or maybe I'd mentioned his name in some passing conversation I'd forgotten. But then, a few days later, he asked about my mother, Diana, and specifically asked if she still lived by the lake. My stomach dropped. That's when I realized this wasn't a coincidence. This was a calculated intrusion. I went to my supervisor, told her everything. She looked at me like I was losing it. "He's trying to bait you," she said. "He wants you to retaliate so he can sue the department." That made sense, logically, but the logic didn't stop the fear. Edgar started dropping more details. My nephew's favorite baseball team, the street I grew up on. It was a cat and mouse game, and he was the one holding all the cards. I felt watched, even when I was at home, miles away from the facility. I started checking my locks constantly. I couldn't trust anyone. Eventually, Edgar was released. I tried to convince myself he was gone, but the feeling of being followed never left. A few months later, I'd moved in with my girlfriend. It was 2 a.m. when my Ring camera pinged my phone. Someone was at the front door. I pulled up the feed and saw a guy in a hoodie talking about selling meat out of his truck. Then he looked directly into the lens, that same calm, terrifying smile I'd seen in the jailhouse. It was Edgar. He didn't run. He just stood there, staring into my home, waiting for me to acknowledge him. That was the last time I saw him, but the nightmare didn't end. I moved again, changed my numbers, and scrubbed my digital footprint. But I still wake up at 2 a.m., checking my doorbell camera, half expecting to see that smile. We trust the system to keep us safe, to keep the bad guys away from our personal lives. But Edgar taught me that privacy is an illusion. He didn't need a key to get to me. He just needed to know who I was. If you're ever in a position of authority, remember, some people aren't just serving time. They're just waiting for their turn to strike.